from my heart to my friends in the Liberal Party. Do not dispute the truth of what our former Minister of Justice has said.
Tonight, we bring you reaction to yesterday's jaw-dropping testimony from former Justice Minister and Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Reconciliation is real, and we're going to move forward with this Prime Minister for as long as he is the Prime Minister.
President of the Metis National Council makes it clear where he stands in the divide between Justin Trudeau and Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Send a clear directive that children cannot be separated from their families regardless of their socio-economic status.
And what's in the new federal legislation on Indigenous child and family services? Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. The fallout from Jody Wilson-Raybould's explosive testimony continued to roll out on Parliament Hill today. Yesterday, she told the Justice Committee she felt political pressure to interfere in the SNC-Lavalin case, but she consistently refused to play ball. Wilson-Raybould feels that's why she was shuffled out as Justice Minister to Veterans Affairs. Right now, here's APTN's Todd Lamoran with what's been happening today.
Thanks, Dennis. The day began with Conservative House Leader Candace Bergen's request for an emergency debate. She said there's a crisis of confidence in the government, all the way from the Prime Minister to the Cabinet to Michael Wernick, the Clerk of the Privy Council, to the current Ministers of Justice and Finance. House Speaker Jeff Regan granted that emergency debate, and it'll begin in just under an hour from now. Today, most Liberal MPs have refused to take one side or the other, some saying they're both right and the truth is somewhere there in the middle. One exception was the Liberal MP for Mission Matsqui, Fraser Canyon. In a report published in a local Abbotsford, BC paper, he stated that Wilson-Raybould's testimony was sour grapes, and that her discomfort with what she described as political interference showed her lack of experience. Needless to say, it was brought up in question period.
Now we have the Liberal member for Mission Matsqui, Fraser Canyon, declaring that her statements yesterday were merely sour grapes and that that her father was pulling her strings. What disrespect to the former Attorney General. Is this the lines of the Liberal Party? Will they apologize for these sexist, misogynist comments?
At the end of question period, MP Jati Sidhu apologized for his remarks. Elizabeth May's question came in the form of some advice for the government.
Advice from my heart to my friends in the Liberal Party. Do not dispute the truth of what our former Minister of Justice has said. Do not attempt to question or undermine or impugn her integrity. No one will believe them if they do. What they must do is tell the truth, let the chips fall where they may, starting with these 3 steps. Call for a public inquiry, release the former Minister of Justice from restrictions in her evidence, and fire the Clerk of the Privy Council office.
We have more reaction on the Hill to the Wilson-Raybould testimony on Nation to Nation. It's the topic of discussion with our panel of MPs, as is the question of whether the scandal is interfering with government business important to Indigenous people. That's coming up right after the national news. Back to you, Dennis.
There's been resounding support for Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony and the way in which the Member of Parliament conducted herself during an appearance before the Justice Committee. Although, as mentioned, at least one Liberal MP has already taken a jab at the former Justice Minister. For more on this, we're joined by Stuart Phillip, the Grand Chief of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Grand Chief Phillip, thanks so much for joining us. It was stunning testimony from Jody Wilson-Raybould yesterday. What sticks out for you?
Well, I think it was many things. Needless to say, the entire nation watched that proceeding, particularly the Indigenous community from sea to sea to sea. And we were inspired by the dignity and the way Jody Wilson-Raybould carried herself through that very intense interview experience. We're very, very proud of her and her ability to recite the facts in great detail and to stand up to the power structure in Ottawa. we thought it was very fitting on Pink Shirt Day that Jody Wilson-Raybould took down some of the slickest bullies in Ottawa in regard to the coercion, the harassment, the pressure that, and the abuse that her and her office experienced over the last 4 months. And she did it so effectively and in such a statesman-like manner. We were all very, very proud of her, and there's a real buzz going on in our communities as a consequence of that historic testimony.
Grand Chief, when Wilson-Raybould was demoted from Justice Minister, you said Indigenous peoples in BC would no longer be voting for the Liberals. Does this testimony just solidify that?
Well, you know, I think that this story is unfolding as we speak, and you know, if the Prime Minister were to step down, I think we'd be looking at it a new day. You know, we know that the Conservatives are still very adverse and quite often hostile to the aspirations of the Indigenous peoples as it relates to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the calls to action through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and generally speaking, our forward movement to rebuild our nation. So we'll see where we go with this, you know, this issue with the political interference with the Attorney General's office when Jody Wilson-Raybould held that post. But we're certainly very, very proud of her strong sense of integrity, her principles, and, you know, her ability to speak her truth in such a powerful and eloquent fashion.
We're already seeing a new round of attacks on Wilson-Raybould. An Abbotsford Liberal MP quoted in a story attacking her. Do you think she should continue to sit as a Liberal MP?
It's difficult to say, as I indicated. We'll see where this goes. You know, I think that you know, the ongoing efforts to smear Jody Wilson-Raybould and the vicious attacks, the backlash are really shameful. They're disgusting, and it just really only serves to you know, to turn Canadians off, so to speak, in regard to, you know, what are supposed to be the principles and foundations of our Constitution. You know, I think we need to move beyond that, and it's really disgraceful, the continuing attacks on Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Grand Chief Philip, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thank you.
At an announcement on child welfare this morning, Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan evaded a question on Jody Wilson-Raybould, saying he wanted to focus on the legislation being presented. Crown Indigenous Services Minister Carolyn Bennett also said today was about the kids, but Metis National Council President Clement Chartier and Assembly of First Nations National Chief Perry Bellegarde did weigh in.
I don't think the press should be doing what they're doing and making it an Indigenous, non-Indigenous issue. To me, it's not. And if you're going to make it one, make it a First Nations Canada issue, not an Indigenous peoples issue, because the Métis Nation certainly, you know, does not want to be included in that kind of debate. Reconciliation is real, and we're going to move forward with this Prime Minister for as long as he is the Prime Minister, and with this government as long as they do form government. And personally, with the record that we have, I wish them well.
What I witnessed yesterday, I witnessed strength, I witnessed integrity, and I witnessed courage. Something we hold up very high up as First Nations people. Now, having said that, there was something very key at that Justice review committee that came out. And I want to key in on that. The recommendation was for further study around that table, that Justice Committee, to look at the possible separation of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice's role. Something good can come out of this.
Max Gros-Louis has worked in First Nations politics for decades. He was first elected Grand Chief of the Huron-Wendat Nation in 1964. He knows the Wilson family well and had this to say about Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony.
Elle a très bien répondu. Elle a basé toutes ses réponses sur ses traditions, sa culture et sa franchise. Elle a été très respectueuse de ses obligations en tant que ministre de la Justice du Canada et elle a été bombardée pendant 5 ou 6 heures, mais c'est une femme formidable et on devrait en avoir beaucoup plus comme ça à travers les Premières Nations.
Of course, we want to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to continue that conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news. To another big story today, and there's word jurisdiction over Indigenous children in the child welfare system may be handed over to Indigenous communities. That's according to new legislation proposed by the Minister of Indigenous Services. APTN's Amber Bernard reports from Ottawa.
Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan introduced Bill C-92 this morning. It promises to help keep Indigenous children and families together.
An act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families finally affirms what Indigenous communities across this country have been asking governments to recognize for decades. That Indigenous communities have inherent jurisdiction over child and family services and that they should be the ones deciding what is best for their children and for their families.
The bill also states poverty should not be a reason to apprehend children.
And send a clear directive that children cannot be separated from their families regardless of their socio-economic status. That is what this bill will do.
While the bill was just tabled on Thursday morning, Inuit Tapiri Kanatami President Natan Obed is hopeful it will help fill gaps for Indigenous children in care. But he says leaders have not been able to properly read the bill.
As of this moment, we haven't had the proper, thorough read of Bill C-92, but in the first reading, there is nothing that jumps out at us that we are unhappy with today.
Obed says he still needs to make sure the bill aligns with the needs of Inuit children and families before moving ahead.
This is a step forward, and this is very positive for us. We will have to take a closer look at the entirety of the Act, Bill C-92, to ensure that Inuit are in full support of the legislation. But
the proposed legislation also states First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities can opt for partial or full jurisdiction over children in care. Amber Bernard, APTN National News, Ottawa.
There are big questions about the future of airline travel in Nunavut. That story and much more coming up after the break. Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 0 and sunny skies for Halifax, -4 in Charlottetown. Snow and -9 for Nain and Cartwright. In Montreal, -4 under sunny skies, -6 under the sun for Sept-Îles. +2 in London, +1 in Sarnia and Peterborough. -7 with snow for Thunder Bay, 11 below and snow in Sioux Lookout. -22 for Puckatawagan, 17 below with snow for the Paw. -12 and sunny for Winnipeg and Gimli, 13 with snow in Dauphin. -15 for Swift Current and Regina with snow, 18 below in North Battleford under sunny skies. -24 in Uranium City. Welcome back. The two biggest airlines in the north want to merge, but federal regulators say that move could create a monopoly and hurt residents. So our Kent Driscoll asked some frequent flyers if they were as concerned as the regulators.
The Competition Bureau of Canada has weighed in on the proposed merger of Canadian North and First Air. They say it would bring less selection and higher prices. Here at the Iqaluit Airport, most of the flights are either Canadian North or First Air. But it was hard to find people opposed to the deal. James Killouk is from Clyde River Nunavut, a community only served by First Air. He hopes for increased capacity.
For me, from my understanding, that could be much better for travel, because sometimes First Air usually full, and so that could be much better for travel to the other communities.
In the response to the Competition Bureau, both Canadian North and First Air pointed out that they are Inuit-owned airlines, and interfering in their merger would be interfering in Inuit economic development. But here's the thing. One of those airlines is owned by Inuit from northern Quebec. The other, owned by Inuit from the Northwest Territories. Neither of those airlines are owned by Nunavut Inuit. Even if the profits are leaving Nunavut, the flyers here at the airport are optimistic that the merger would benefit them.
I think it's going to be really good because there won't be much as competition. Price is going to go lower. I think I like it a lot.
Like most Nunavut residents, Methuselah Adaguta has a favorite airline. His is First Air, and he hopes the airline doesn't change too much under a merger.
Whenever there's bad weather, they don't land to other communities, but First Air doesn't.
The proposed merger of First Air and Canadian North is now on the desk of Transport Minister Marc Garneau. He'll make a recommendation to the federal cabinet, who will approve or deny a merger. Whether or not the Competition Bureau's fears of a price-jacking monopoly come true, well, that's still very much up in the air. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
The Botanical Garden of Montreal is opening its Butterflies Go Free exhibit. During March and April, visitors will have the opportunity to learn about the evolution of these masterpieces of nature. Danielle Rochette has more.
Thousands of multicolored butterflies fill the majestic greenhouse. They come from butterfly farms in more than 10 different countries. There are more than 150,000 species in the world, and 70 are represented here. Behind their many charms lie complex evolutionary processes to ensure the survival of the species, as explained by biologist Sonia Charret.
Those beautiful butterflies, the colors and the patterns are not there for us. It's the result of that evolution, and that's what we want people to understand when they come here, that butterflies and nature are really linked together. They had evolved together, and it's an equilibrium they have now that we should protect.
Monarch butterflies with the orange and black striped wings beat longevity records as they fly all the way from Quebec to Mexico for the winter. And the blue morpho that have developed striking colors and iridescence on their wings to mate, but can also easily hide from predators. But global changes and human-produced perturbations also affect these insects. Maxime Larrivé, head of research in collections, is concerned.
Global change is like a carpet that's sliding under their feet. And at some point, at the rate at which it's happening, they may end up completely away from the carpet and in conditions where they can't survive. So we are focused on measuring the rate at which it's changing and how and what are the traits that butterflies share that would allow them to adapt to global change.
Larrivé is also developing tools to raise awareness among the youth. The program was created 4 years ago with Inuit teenagers in Nunavik National Parks.
It's amazing to see the interest that they have and the curiosity that they have with the butterflies that we collect. They love doing it, and they have an eye for identifying them and differentiating them that is exceptional. And it's a great thing to do, and then really to see how to share with them and to learn from them also about the land is very special.
For many Indigenous peoples, butterflies means transformation, but it's also believed to be a messenger from the spirit world. Danielle Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
Some are wondering why Alberta Premier Rachel Notley was recently gifted a headdress. We'll hear from them after the break. Here's the rest of Friday's weather outlook. Minus 22 for Peace River, Grand Prairie, and Fort Chipewyan. Minus 15 with snow for Medicine Hat. 20 below in Edmonton and Red Deer. Plus 7 and sunny skies for Tofino, Victoria, and Vancouver. Minus 17 under the sun for Fort Nelson. Minus 7 in snow for Smithers. Minus 17 in Old Crow. Minus 7 in Whitehorse. In the NWT, minus 19 in Wrigley. 24 below in Yellowknife. Minus 17 with snow in Sax Harbor. 23 below for Colville Lake. Minus 26 in Chesterfield. Minus 25 for Cambridge Bay and Baker Lake. Minus 25 in Arctic Bay. 18 below in Iqaluit. Welcome back. When Alberta Premier Rachel Notley received a headdress at a powwow in Lethbridge, there was a lot of pushback on social media from people who thought she didn't deserve such a high honor. But as Tamara Pimentel reports, some Indigenous leaders say she does.
The decision to honor Premier Rachel Notley with a headdress and the Blackfoot name Braveheart Woman has received some criticism within the Indigenous community.
I do believe that she does deserve some, sort of merit, some sort of accolade, but to be given a traditional headdress, to be given that ceremonial platform in the community, I don't agree with. We have children in the community that need traditional names, that need reconnection, that need acceptance back into the culture.
Blackfoot activist Garrett Smith says he respects the family and elders involved in the decision, but he was also one of many to challenge it over social media.
I get, the relationship building. I get the need for reconciliation. Of course I do. A lot of our people don't have that connection. And for us to pool our cultural resources to give it away, it seems like we need to refocus exactly where our priorities lie, and how to rebuild our own cultures instead of giving it away.
But Jason Goodstriker, whose father decided to give Notley the headdress, says it's something she earned.
And there's been, quite a few millions of dollars that have been transacted over her term. And things that you don't hear about, but it runs the infrastructure for our communities, health, housing, all kinds of stuff like that.
And I hope that the conversations carry on, and all I want to do is make sure that we honor the gift that we've been given today.
Goodstriker says the pushback on social media portrays a lack of compassion.
We failed at a test being put to our people in terms of understanding and compassion. Whenever something happens like this to an Indian woman, we would all rise to her defense, and we would all try and be there to be by her side. So why is there so much lateral violence between women on a woman leader? And for that matter, what's the whole deal with Indian and white thing? Because as Indians, we all obviously get pressured, and we rise to each other's defense when it comes to racism, but now this is being reversed.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National.
That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and download the APTN News app. Stick around for a stacked episode of Nation to Nation with Todd Lamoran. That's next. Happy birthday to Wilfred Moore. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.